we're all looking for easy care native plants, and today we're here to show you a few. Andrea DeLong-Amaya, Director of Horticulture at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, highlights tried and true options from her new book, The Texas Native Plant Primer, 225 plants for an earth-friendly garden. How are you doing, Andrea?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to have you here. Well, I'm excited to talk about this book.
Me too.
It is chock full of wonderful information.
Thank you.
Why did you write the book?
Timber Press, the publishing company, approached the Wildflower Center about doing it because we're all about Texas native plants. And personally, I just really want to be able to share my passion for gardening with native plants, and so it was a perfect mix.
There's a quote I have to say here because I think it's really great. You say, these elegant, quirky, resilient, mysterious, healing, inspiring, calming, and thrilling plants will deepen curiosity and guide you towards a blissful and occasionally wretched gardening. And I thought that's such a wonderful statement. Yeah, would you like to elaborate a little bit on that? Because that's a lot of adjectives.
Yeah, and it can be wretched too, sure. Yeah, well, it is tricky to garden in Texas because we have such a wide range of conditions. The hope is that the book will guide people through how to do that in the best way possible.
Well, wonderful. Well, I love the way the book is organized. You sort of have an intro, making a case, some great guidance before you get into all the species that you have. So let's first just back up a little bit and say, for those who don't know, what is a native plant?
Yeah, that's kind of a tricky one to tackle, and it's very complicated, but I think a good summary would be a plant that occurs naturally where it evolved without human introduction, and then layering on the geographic information because, where is a native plant native to? So, Texas is a big state, so you want to say, is it native to East Texas or West Texas or the Bull Creek drainage, and kind of narrowing it down. And really why it's important is going to depend on your goals for your landscape.
We have native plants that are native to Texas, but they also occur like in Virginia. But if we source that material from Virginia, it might not do so well. Why is that the case?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like even the same species can have different genetics in different locations because they've adapted to the conditions where they're growing. So they may be cold hardier or more drought resistant in different places.
Right. There's some definitions you make for adapted, naturalized, and invasive plants as well as the native. So what's the deal with those three?
So adapted plants would be perhaps plants that are not native but do well in people's gardens, and people use those a lot. I think of something like the pink skullcap, for example. It's not native to Texas, but it's native in Mexico. It grows well here. And then invasive species are things that really take over and become a problem, and we definitely want to avoid those.
Why native versus naturalized? Besides just they evolve there. I mean, what are some of those big selling points or benefits that we get out of natives versus, say, a naturalized species?
Right. I think that the native plants have a benefit because they look like our region. They're a way to honor our natural heritage. They're generally going to be more adapted to your location if you've selected the right plants. An example is that, when some of the extreme weather we've had in the last few years, extreme cold, extreme drought, that people have come to our plant sales saying, I've decided to go native because my adapted plants just didn't make it as well.
Right. And those curveballs, I think we're seeing more frequently. To me, really make that case for those natives because, again, those are curveballs to those species as well, but they tend to do a bit better.
I tried to select plants that were representing all different parts of the state. Central Texas is easy because that's where so much is overlapping, but if you're a gardener in the Trans-Pecos or in the southern part of the state, there are plants in there that you can use. Right,
and they're over, I know you have 225 plants, but there's over 5,000 something vascular plants listed. And I know on the Native Plants of North America on the Wildflower Center's website, which is a wonderful resource, has, I think it's something like 3,100. So there's a lot to choose from. You also have some great guidance in the book about how to grow, because it's not necessarily as simple as, oh, I like this native plant, it's native to Texas, let's plug it in there. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how you decided and what you decided to incorporate in terms of that information, because there's everything from wildflower seeding meadows to site preparation, invasive. So why did you decide to organize it like that, and sort of what are some of those big takeaways you think that's important for people?
Yeah, I looked at what I would have wanted to read as as an early gardener, like what would have been helpful for me, and so that's kind of how I decided what would be helpful for people. And I want people to be successful, and some Traditional horticultural practices don't really work for native plants as well. You know,
Sure.
for example, bluebonnets really don't like a lot of compost in the soil. And if
Right.
you put them in well-composted garden soils, you get a lot of growth, and they'll probably get powdery mildew, and maybe they'll bloom a little bit, but they're just not going to be as hardy as they are if they're just growing in, dirt.
Right. We're so used to that intensive model of like, you have to enrich the soil so much. You've got to throw this
Yeah.
water down. And those natives really allow us to sort of plug into what's there, right? You don't have to improve upon, because as your point, they've evolved with those conditions. If you're going to, say, start the yard, like start to redesign your yard, what are some of the big steps you think you would boil those down to that you've included in the book?
I definitely think doing a site analysis and deciding like what do you have and what are your goals, and trying to match the right plants to the right soil.
What are some goals that you think are aspirational for people? I mean, because it could be anything from just, I want color or whatever. What are some of the larger goals that you hear at the Wildflower Center that people express when they come to the native plant sales and other things like that?
Definitely well adapted and low maintenance.
Okay.
A big thing is obviously wildlife and pollinators in particular. That's always a great one. And then the book is organized by different categories. So, ground covers, perennials, trees, shrubs. And that's intended to give people some ideas of the different vegetational layers that they can incorporate into their landscapes too.
I'd like to discuss a few of these that you've got. We can't talk about all of them, but let's just sort of go through. So ground covers. What are some of the ones that you've listed there? Or what's one, let's zip it up, what's one that you feel that's really great?
I love the horse herb because it's a plant that grows in shady spots and it stays low. You can mow it, you can walk on it. If you're looking for a ground cover where grass won't grow because it's too shady, that's a great one. You probably already have it.
Right.
Encourage it.
Right, and it's a bit ephemeral though. It can sort of really rock out when the moisture's there and sometimes pull back a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's a tough, hardy plant, but it'll go dormant if it's dry. And if you water it a little bit, it'll stay green pretty much year round.
Excellent. Well, what about perennials?
One of my favorite would be the Texas green eyes. And I like this plant because it's not super familiar for people, but it's a really easy to grow plant for most of the state into the panhandle. And what's fun about it, it's a little yellow daisy flower, and the center part is green, hence the green eyes. And it's the unopened flower, disc flowers that are green. So it's just kind of a fun little plant, and it blooms a lot.
Wonderful. And that's readily available?
It's somewhat available, but I would like to see more of it. It's an underused plant for sure.
And that's a great point of that too, is that we need to drive that demand for these plants so we can get more of them because there are so many. What about grasses?
Yeah, one of our favorites would be the windmill grass. That's just a cute little plant that gets maybe a foot to 2 feet depending on conditions, but it just has a great texture to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of frothy. It would be really nice, in front of some other plants that might want something to anchor it to the ground. And it flowers all, off and on all year pretty much. Maybe not the winter, but it looks great.
Yeah, and it's pretty bulletproof as well, which I love about it. So it can be a little tricky. Some people think it resembles Bermuda, I've heard. So sometimes you got to, sharpen your skills a little bit.
It does not run like Bermuda.
No, it does not. No, it doesn't. But
the flowers look kind of similar.
Right. And what about cacti or succulents?
The cacti are fun. You can put them in the ground and they're very drought resistant, or you can put them in a container and kind of highlight them. Sometimes gardens can be too lush and the surrounding plants might be a little bit bullies and sort of swamp smaller plants like the lace cactus. So having them in a container is a great way to feature them and protect them from surrounding plants. They're also drought resistant, so they can do just fine in a pot with very little care.
And then what about small trees?
One of my favorites is the Blanco crabapple, and that one's also a little bit hard to find, but is a really fun plant. Big pink flowers on it in the spring, and it has a lot of features to it. It has nice fall color too, kind of purples and some oranges and reds, so it's kind of colorful, and it makes a nice understory tree. The fruits are kind of good to eat if you process them.
Jams or jellies, just like everything in Texas,
And strangely, when the fruit are dropped on the ground, they smell really good as they start to ferment. They have a really sweet fragrance to them.
Interesting. Well, Andrea, thank you so much. There's so much information in here. It's a really great resource. I think that the viewers are really going to love to dig into this one. So thank you so much for coming.